Well, I kind of like to unpack that question by looking at two or three different key terms that the person used. One is, what is a psychopath? So as a psychologist, I'm going to talk about that. What are some of the behaviors and attitudes people have if we consider them psychopaths? Another one is the issue of evil. And that's from a Swedenborgian point of view. What do we mean by evil spirits, and how do they have influence on who we are? The other one that's a key word in this question is the word intent or intentionality. So let's first talk about psychopaths. Psychopaths is a term that is not used by all psychologists, but those that do use it, they've come up with a list of different behaviors and different attitudes that are often seen. So some of the behaviors and attitudes that we see in psychopaths are that they are rather glib. And a glib means a person who is probably not telling the truth, and they're coming across as rather shallow and impulsive, and we don't quite trust them. Another thing along the same line is that the person might be very impulsive in their actions and their behavior. They may do whatever they feel like at the moment, regardless of the law, regardless of what effect they're having on other people. And because of that, they may have had a history all the way through their adolescence of being a juvenile delinquent. They may have done all kinds of deviant behaviors, not just breaking the law. They may have just broken the social norms, saying things that are unusual or cruel, and then laughing about it. They may be deceitful. In fact, their lies may be inconsistent. They may not be very good at keeping up with their own lies. But when we see somebody that we really can't trust very much, it's not unusual that this is one part of the pattern of psychopathy. Another is that they're rather irresponsible for their behavior. So if they have a tendency to steal or lie or even rape somebody, they don't seem to have a regard for whether or not this person is in pain or has suffered because of their actions. And they don't show much empathy. They really don't seem to have much empathy, and they don't even fake it. Unfortunately, with all of these negative behaviors, they also can sometimes be quite charming and very alluring, and people who you might have fun with. But unfortunately, very often they're pulling others in to kind of get them into trouble or to cause harm. And the more they're planning it, the more they're responsible for it, according to Swedenborg. Now, another term that psychologists use in addition to psychopathy or psychopaths is a phrase called antisocial personality disorder. That's a term that's more often used by professional psychologists. Anyway, so let's switch to a Swedenborgian point of view. If you are talking about evil, I want to be very cautious to not make a spiritual judgment about any one individual, even though psychologists evaluate psychopaths and they diagnose them and they define their personality according to these patterns. I want to be careful that we don't cross the line and start deciding whether somebody's going to hell. But let's talk about what Swedenborg says are generalities. And one is that, according to Swedenborg, I'm going to give a quote here from Apocalypse Explained. It is from hell that murder itself proceeds. So let's talk about that word proceed. It really implies that hellish ideas or evil ideas come from the source, and that is the hells. So it's like an influence that's coming in. Just like we have influences from the heavens, we have influences coming from hells. And we as individuals are responsible for receiving this. And we may take influences from both the heavens and the hells, and we may distort them with our falsities or trying to satisfy our own love of self and our own love of the world. And if a person is having intent to do harm, that means they're premeditating, they're thinking about it ahead of time, and therefore probably more receptive to the influences from the hells. Now, another is that typically a person who is really in a long-term pattern of enjoying doing hellish things or destructive things to others and really hurting others and seem to take delight in it. Swedenborg tells us that we are held more responsible for actions if basically our mind is working at a full function and if we love doing it. So it's in our intellect and our will. And the smarter we are and the more we really understand what we're doing and the effect that our behavior has on others, the more we are really responsible. In Conjugal Love, it talks about how there's different levels of responsibility. If a person is, imagine somebody who's part of a family, like let's say an organized crime family, or they're part of a gang, and they just follow along, it's really not the individual's responsibility if they're just following along out of fear and they just do the bad things. They do the crimes just because they have to. And they're not really thinking through what they're doing. The Lord is very merciful for somebody who's of lower intelligence and is just really almost childlike. But if a person is really mature enough to be able to know what they're doing, they're thinking about it, they're intending to do it, and then afterwards they relish the idea that they harmed somebody, they stole, or they manipulated somebody, or they killed somebody that was their enemy. And if they really enjoy that, then their will is involved. And they not only intended to do it, but afterwards they have no remorse, and they are really relishing the idea that they got away with it. The Lord holds them far more responsible. And according to Heaven and Hell 591, evil is constantly emanating from hell. So it's almost like there's this constant wind of bad ideas, but we are the receptacles, and we get to decide whether or not we will receive those. So in summary, the evil spirits do influence us, and we can decide whether or not to be receptacles of it. The Lord also is always sending positive influences to us, all goodness and all truth. But if we choose to distort it or just tune it out and don't care about the Lord and care much more about ourselves and our worldly possessions, the more mature we are, the more we're responsible for that.